This is Show Up as a Leader, a show from People Forward Network, helping you maximize your positive impact on the world by becoming your best, fully authentic self. Hey everyone, I am so sparkly excited for this conversation that I have with Charley Lapomardo. They are an amazing, amazing human. I mean, their nickname is Sparkle, and Charley is an experienced facilitator and founder of a company called Sparkleworks. And what they do is design and host spaces to help humanity realize their potential. And we talk about how emotions are not problems and how do we actually identify the problems that we really truly need to solve on an individual as well as a collective organizational team-based level. We walk through 4 questions that we need to be asking ourselves, that we need to be asking our teams that are really, really critical. I think so often we jump into action bias and we want to just get going. And maybe we don't have the full energy or the full sparkle, if you will, behind what it's going to take to actually get it done. And it's a missed opportunity. So you're going to want to listen for the 4 questions that we want to be thinking about to vet problems. Charley talks about the litmus test of landing on the right solution and does it have the highest impact, lowest effort, and maximum sparkle. Looking at how can we take something and go, okay, this is one version. What is the sparkling version? So yes, there's a whole lot of sparkle in this conversation, but it's very, very tangible on a personal level. It's very, very tangible on an organizational level, a team-based level. And while all of our episodes, we strive for them to be evergreen content, this is also very timely because this is coming out at the end of a year, sort of a new year. There's a lot of goal setting that is happening. And hopefully you can take some really tangible, practical nuggets to think about for yourself as an individual, for your teams, for your organization. Have you really taken the steps to get truly clear of what you're trying to solve for? Are you super clear about what people's role is in that, what you're going to do? And have you created the sparkliest version you can that is going to have the best energy and the best possible outcomes to truly solve those problems? So take a listen. I think you're going to want to have a pen and paper because you're going to want to write those questions down. There's lots of tangible things that you can take, and hopefully it helps you on multiple levels. Okay, so I am super, super jazzed to have this conversation with you for multiple levels, but right off the bat, we were introduced because of our mutual love of Sparkle. And I don't know, I mean, I've met a lot of people who love Sparkle, but I don't know if there's anyone who loves Sparkle more than you and I. Right? I mean, it is my favorite color for anyone who like it. Yes, Sparkle is a color, but you also named your company after it, Spark Shop. So I want to dive off because people are like, whatever, that's so weird. But there's also some thought behind it. Whenever people ask me, like, what do you mean sparkle is your favorite color? And the first time we met, we had this conversation about what does sparkle mean to you? And I think it goes deeper than, yes, it's pretty and it's shiny. And I think it's making a comeback because I admit in stores lately, I'm like, there's a whole lot more sparkle options to purchase than there ever was. Anyway, but that's going to be our jumping off point is talk to me about what does sparkle mean to you?
Oh, thank you for asking. Okay, well, so my name is Charley, and I also go by Sparkle because that is so core to who I am. So, Sparkle is a name that I was given and then sort of adopted for myself because it speaks to the essence of who I am. This like pure, good, light energy inside of me. And I believe that everyone has it, and I think it's the best of us. And so I sparkle with glitter, like I'm wearing glitter eyeshadow right now. That's just how I do it. But not everyone sparkles at glitter. Some people are like, ew, don't get near me with that, which is totally fair. But I've seen people sparkle when they're working through a problem, when they're like, oh, wait, okay, I get it. It's this and this and this. Some people sparkle if you ask them about trains or if you ask them about a sport that they love. They come alive. It is observable. You can see it. And so there's this like sparkle flow moment. And when a bunch of people do it together, it like supercharges. And I call it generative authentic self-expression. It is creative at its core. It's like, wow, I'm so energized by this. It's not draining my energy. It's me expressing my energy, which then creates more of it. I don't have space to be self-conscious, and I feel like I can do anything if I channel this energy. So that's Sparkle how I define it. And I also really want to hear how you define it since you are also a huge fan of this idea.
Well, I love it. So, yeah, so for people listening, like, oh my gosh, I love the way you put it. And I'll talk about how I define it in a second because I think that people can go, oh, it's frivolous, or, if I don't identify as female, then therefore like sparkles beyond me or whatever it might be. And yes, you and I both love external expression of sparkle. Like, right, I have a sparkly stapler and I have, sparkle on the background and I wear sparkle because it makes me happy. I'm pretty sure it started with, I think I had seasonal affective disorder, and I'm like, and when you live in Minnesota and the winter is awful, I don't know, like it brings some sunshine or vitamin D in a weird way. I don't know. Anyway, I digress. But I love that you shared that it's like, look, you could be like a behind the scenes person who doesn't like to communicate very well with people, but once you just kind of stay in your own zone and whatever it is that you work on, right? And you can still sparkle in that. And so I love that for you, it's that genuine self-expression because I think we all have that, and so often we hold parts of ourselves back for one reason or another because we don't think we're smart enough or because, we don't think we're gonna be respected or we don't think we're gonna be heard or whatever. We're overcompensating for some kind of head trash that we have. I mean, it happens all the time, and so I love how you look at it, and I love that you have the glitter eyeshadow on, by the way. But here's the thing, as I think when I think about sparkle, it is kind of similar, but it's that we all have a light inside of us. We all have gifts, we all have talents, we all have amazing things that make us unique, and there are no two human beings on this planet that are exactly alike. And the work that we do is all about helping people own who they are authentically. I mean, we define leadership fundamentally is we are maximizing our positive impact on the world by becoming our best, fully authentic self and then supporting those around us to break past barriers and step into their greatness. So if you want to like put it in the context of this, it's we define leadership as you're maximizing your impact by figuring out who the heck you are, not who you think you should be, not who your parents or your neighbors or society or social media or whatever, but who the heck are you at your core and how can you show up more authentically as you and create a space around you where others can do the same? So I always talk about like, it's not about our sparkle shining so bright that it's like an overcompensation where we don't create space for others that can also let their sparkle shine. It's a mutuality. So when I say like never let anyone dull your sparkle, it is really fundamentally about we got to know who we are and we got to quiet the head trash and we got to know whose opinions matter and we got to have tools to ground ourselves and ways to still show up as a leader when our humanity wants to get the best of us because we're all imperfect, but that's really at its core. It's can we do that and can we create space for others and go, you know what, you're different than me, but rather than you being scary or a threat, I want to lean in and learn more about who you are, and you being more of you doesn't somehow diminish my value. And I think so often we look at this as a zero sum game and it's crap. It's not.
100%. So I am a user researcher in my past profession. And a lot of people ask me, like, I don't know what questions to ask when I'm interviewing someone. And I always say, ask the question that you are most genuinely curious about, because your curiosity is a cue toward the connection between you and that other person. And that connection comes from sparkle. And I also love what you said about we're not shining so brightly that we are pushing others away, that we are stealing the spotlight. I liken it to like when you're on a dance floor and a whole crowd of people leave. Sparkling as a leader is like stepping back into that space with arms wide open so that other people can fill that space. I'm really uncomfortable being the first one in the limelight, but then after that, I can make space for others.
I love it. I love it. Well, so let's talk about that because I know that when you and I first met, we also like realized that so often in my life I've been told, "Oh, I'm too much," or "I'm this," or "I'm that." And I know other people have heard that too in one way, shape, or form. Or you have people who purposely don't speak up, whatever that might be. They don't raise their hand and volunteer for something at work. They don't speak up in a difficult conversation because they don't want to have that label of being difficult or being too much or being whatever that cringy fear-based label is they have in their head or worry, and so then they hold themselves back. And so talk about you said a little bit, but talk about like actually how being too much can be a gift to create more space for others because people, when they use it, they're using it as a derogatory to like shut you down or to dampen you or whatever. But I love that you have a different way of thinking about that. It's not just about, "Oh, I'm not gonna be held back," but it's not about ego. It's really about holding that space for others. So say a little bit more.
Yes. Well, the first is being an example. If I am shining through as who I truly am, other people can see that clearly. And it is both a powerful magnet and a powerful, well, actually, I'll say magnet because for people who have a compatible charge, they are pulled right to it. But for people who are incompatible, it repels them like nothing else. And for a people pleaser, that's really scary because I see the best in everyone. So I want everyone to see the best in me. But that's simply not how it is. There are people who, when they see who I truly am, say, nope, I have no interest in taking part in that. And that's okay. That's everyone's right. So when I am sparkling, when I am being fully myself, when I'm being loud in a way that sometimes offends people, when I'm being sparkly in a way that makes people uncomfortable, other people can see that and they say, okay, well, if they can do it, that's something I can do too. Right. And it lessens that fear a little bit. Being the one who tests the waters, other people can observe, like, oh, actually, that didn't go super bad for them. Like, maybe I can do that for myself. And so the idea of too big is something I had dealt with my whole life. There are so many intersections between my creative spirit, my artist spirit, my queerness, and my neurodivergence that all of those things, when they come together, it's a powerful mix. So I have been too much from the beginning. Like my poor parents, they put me in so many extracurriculars until we found theater and music. And that was really what made me come alive because it was an appropriate venue for attention and for being big and for acting and for expressing myself. And something I've learned through this process is for people who I'm too much for, there's no amount of dimming myself that will actually make them comfortable because I can't guess at that. Even for one person, never mind a full group of colleagues, never mind a full company. I have no idea what about me will make other people uncomfortable. So if I proactively dim that sparkle, I'm the one suffering with no guarantee that I will be just enough for them.
Okay, I wanna just, like, do a rewind on that because there's so much power in what you just said, Charlie, is because I love it, like, no amount I think that for people that are uncomfortable, whatever, usually the people that we either have a shame trigger around or, get uncomfortable or have whatever you wanna call it, is usually because they, on some level, are reflecting our deepest insecurities. And so it's like, "Oh, that person, you're too much," and it could be that they have this insecurity of, like, that they're not enough or that if they spoke up, that they'd be rejected, and we don't realize it, but we do tend to judge other people based off of our biggest insecurities. And so I think that there's something to that of, you know, as soon as you try to twist yourself in a pretzel to meet someone else's expectations. We call it the OPs, other people's expectations, other people's attitudes, other people's opinions. It's like if you have like a plate, like you have the outer rim and the inner rim. The outer rim is the OPs. And it's like as soon as you try to meet one person's expectations, it's like a bad game of pinball. You got someone else's over here that is something else, and someone else is over here. And it's not sustainable. And you're running around like bing, 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 bing and it's never gonna be there, but if you get really clear of who you are, that center ring, that center of the plate, if you will, is your core, and if you get super clear about your core values, who you are, what matters to you, what makes you tick, and you make decisions and act and behave from that place of clarity and that place of authenticity, then 1, it becomes easier to deflect the OPs that don't matter, the other people. It also becomes easier to, like, say no, because so often we say no to things that we really wanna say yes to or vice versa because we're worried about it's really easy to move through our life with less people shooting on us, right? Less of the guilt and the resentment. It's like, no, I'm moving through clarity. And it doesn't mean I'm never going to disappoint people. It doesn't mean there's going to be people who don't like me, but it's recognizing I'm not for everybody. And your organization isn't for everybody, right? You don't have every single customer in the world. You want the people who are your loyal partners, if you will. You don't like I'm having this conversation with my son, like, not everyone needs to like you in middle school. Like, there's people you don't like, and that's okay as long as you're not a dick to them, right? Like, I'm like, don't be a jerk to them. Don't be right, but you don't have to like them, but you also don't have to be rude to them or overt. You can just kind of leave them be. And you don't need to talk about them or gossip about them. They're just like, they're not your, for whatever reason, they're not your cup of tea. You're also not going to be everyone's cup of tea. And that's okay. As long as, again, people aren't overtly, hating on you and discriminating against you and being crappy to you, because that's not okay on any level. So let's talk about, how do you weave this in to groups and teams at Spark Shop? Like, talk about, how do you weave the sparkle in, and how do people leverage this, like, tangibly, other than, hey, don't dim your sparkle? Like, what does that look like from a work standpoint?
Yeah, the idea of sparkle can be so fluffy because it is emotional and energetic. But like I said, I'm a researcher. So Spark Shop marries a method and an energetic phenomenon. So the format for Spark Shop is based on the double diamond design thinking method. It wasn't sort of shoehorned into that. I worked for years with friends, sort of organically exploring, how do we break down a problem and get to what we're actually going to do about it? And in the end, it looked like this framework that I was already familiar with. So that's sort of how it codified. And there are many problem solving frameworks, and there are many design thinking frameworks, and it takes all kinds, right? It's like you need different tools in the toolbox. The way that the framework pairs with Sparkle is that we use Sparkle as a tool, as an intuitive tool to guide us to the outcomes that will actually work. Because have you ever been in a meeting, like a road mapping meeting, for example, where you say, okay, these are the problems, this is what we're going to do about it, this is the priority and effort. And then you look at the end result and you're like, I really don't wanna do that though, like that okay, I guess that's what I should do, speaking of shoulds. And in a business setting, never mind the fact that, like, those initiatives usually fail, but on a personal level, you shouldn't be following through with solutions that you're not excited about. It's your life, and a solution that makes you excited is just as good, if not better, as the solution that you feel like you should go forward with. So just last week, I was in a session and someone read their problem statement to me. And I said, "You seem really excited about that." And he was like, "No, but like that, I don't know. That makes sense." And I said, "Okay, how can we make this more sparkly?" And so he told me what about it made him feel excited. And so from there, we worked through, like, why do you feel like you should do this? And then what would you actually want to do that still solves the problem? So in the framework, we start with, here's the problem. Then we move into the solution, because you need to know of all of your solutions, what will actually solve the problem. Because if it's exciting, if it's sparkly, but it's not going to serve the function of solving the problem, that's not your best solution. If it will solve your problem, but you're not feeling super excited about it, that's not the right solution. So we're looking for the middle ground. And Double Diamond and the Spark Shop method is based on divergence and convergence. So generating as many possible problems as possible, as many possible solutions, and then narrowing in on, okay, what's the root problem? And then what are the solutions that are high impact, low effort, maximum sparkle?
Oh my God, I love that. High impact, low effort, maximum sparkle. Like, that should be just a rule of business, right?
100%.
What I appreciate about that is, I think that there is such a pull, especially in this fast-paced world that is constantly changing and going at a warp speed, for action bias. I mean, it's been around for a long time, but I'm seeing an elevation of action bias showing up more and more on leaders and on teams, where it's like all of a sudden everything is in that quadrant of urgent and important. Everything is a freaking crisis, right? We have to fix this now, or we have to do that. And yeah, there's a lot of problems and issues, but what happens is we short circuit that ideation process. We short circuit, okay, we've identified that there's an opportunity or a need or whatever it is. But then what we do is, as soon as an idea comes out, we're already down on, how are we going to get across the finish line? How are we going to rally people? And we've short circuited that ideation process, and we start jumping on things. And so what I love about that is it reminds me of the work that we've been doing the last few years. We've been leveraging one of the tools we use, because a lot of tools in your toolbox. We've been leveraging the 6 types of working genius from the Table Group and Pat Lencioni. And the premise is two of them are your geniuses, where you're in sparkle, you're in flow, like you're energetically like your go-to. Two of them are your working competencies, where you can be effective, but there's going to be some time bound limits. If you spend too much time there, it's gonna kind of be that energy vampire at some point. And then two of them are your working frustrations. Doesn't mean you can't do them, but they really energetically like totally dim your sparkle. And we tend to short circuit those, shy away from those, and lean on our geniuses. But what we don't realize is what sparkle, what genius is needed at what stage of work. So if we're in ideation, we need people with the geniuses that are appropriate for ideation to be able to shine and do their thing. Now that we've come up with the solutions, or we have a bunch of ideas on the table, now we have to start vetting them, right? Which is going to be the high impact, right? The minimal effort and the highest sparkle. Well, we need that vetting process as well as considering the people aspect. How are we going to rally people and create energy around this? Because it doesn't do any good. Well, that's a separate phase of work. And people who have those geniuses really need to be called upon to lead in that stage, if you will. And then once we've come up with what is that solution, what is that project, what is that idea we're going to rally behind, we kind of know how we're going to create energy around it. Then we get to the implementation. How are we going to get it across the finish line? What is it going to take? And what I see is people who have like their geniuses or their sparkle in that like implementation phase will short circuit, especially the ideation, or they're already going to why it won't work, or they're already vetting it. It's like, no, let's get the stuff out on the table. Now let's vet. Now let's go across the finish line. Or people are so in the loop of activate and implement that they don't ever take time to even notice that there's an opportunity, or they keep repeating doing the things they've always done. So I just share all that because I think very tactically, practically, when we have these problems, we don't take the time to get really clear about what are we solving for? Does this make sense? Are we just jumping on what we've always done because it's comfortable and familiar, where maybe this is an opportunity to get out of our comfort zone? Are we shying away from something because it feels too big and scary, or maybe we could break it down to something smaller? But I'm not kidding, Charlie. Every client that I work with, they've got 100 priorities. I'm like, no one can rally around that. Like nobody. Like they all talk about that Johari window has now become useless because everything falls in urgent and important, and nobody has the discernment to say, well, you know what? That's a nice to have, not a necessary. So anyway, so I just share all that because it's so relevant. And this is evergreen content, but we're recording this at the end of the year. You start going to a new year and people are all like, what am I going to hold on to from the previous year? What am I going to do new and different? And people do all kinds of goal settings. But what a lot of times when we set goals, we don't think about the energy. Like, is this a goal that I'm actually motivated? And maybe I have to do this because my boss is saying, or the organization or a regulator or whatever. There's some external, like, you don't have a choice, but there are ways to look at how could I make this more motivating for me, even though this is kind of being imposed on me.
100%. And I don't think that energetic motivation is a nice to have when you're dealing with your personal problems. There are times in work where you just have to do it because someone said so. As much as I detest that, it goes against everything in my body. I've learned that that's just how it goes sometimes, and that's why it's work. But in your life, you are the boss. You get to decide what you do because you said so. So having that energetic motivation, I don't think that's optional. I think it's critical for figuring out where you actually want to go. Because if you're setting a goal in your life that you're not energetically motivated to do, that's probably not the right goal. And it's probably not worth doing. Or at a minimum, it's worth breaking down why you're willing to spend this much time and energy on it when you could be doing something that actually excites you.
Well, and I would add, I don't think it's just though in your personal life, because I even think from a work standpoint, yeah, are there little things we have to do? But if I even think about myself, when there are tasks as a business owner that, yeah, like I'm the only person who can do them, or, there isn't someone to delegate to, or whatever it is, I will procrastinate on them. Right. And then it becomes a bigger thing. It takes right? It takes longer than it needs to because, yeah, it's like, but I think This is where I always go back to, we always say start with our lighthouse from an organization standpoint and an individual standpoint. If we are really clear about our own purpose, what we believe, what we care about, we're clear about our core values, and we've behaviorally define them so I know what behaviors have me be in alignment and out of alignment, right? Like what behaviors allow my sparkle to shine, what behaviors are going to dim it and, not be who I want to be. When we get clear about that, and then we layer everything up to like, okay, this might seem like a medial task that is something that I hate doing. But if I can go, but this is in service of us being able to do this. And you know what? If I don't have these pieces in order, if I don't have this contract buttoned up, if I don't have the finances or the budget or whatever, we can't serve this. And so I think so often what we miss an opportunity to do, not just for ourselves individually, but I would say from a work standpoint, an organization standpoint, is when we don't keep that lighthouse truly out in front, where it's a nice exercise and their words on a website, but we're not regularly reminding people how what you do every single day matters and feeds a bigger purpose. Even if this seems like maybe it's a mundane task, there's value in it. If I now know that this is value or it makes someone else's life easier, or when I procrastinate on this, there's a ripple effect because this person over here on this team can't get stuff done, or it slows down accounting, or it slows down payment processes. Like we tend to be so narrowly focused. And when I lift my head up and go, my actions or inactions have an impact and have a ripple effect, and if I understand how it fits into a purpose, then I think that sometimes that can change the energy flow. And it's not just for our personal life because we will procrastinate on the stuff that we don't like, that's in our working frustration. And if we don't either know how to speak up and say, I hate this or whatever, and have a conversation with our leader of how can it be more motivating or how can I connect it to something that makes it more energetically appealing, or is this something that I actually really, is this the best use of my time? Not because it's beneath me, but because it's an energy suck. Is there someone else on this team that actually this would fulfill them? And can we move some responsibilities around? I think those are conversations that we don't have enough because we're just so heads down and like, no, you fit in this box, you fit in this job description. I don't know. I mean, what are your thoughts and what are you seeing with the groups you work with?
Well, what came to my mind was research from Deloitte about belonging and contribution and purpose. And things like belonging and inclusion, those have become buzzwords in business. I think rightfully so. I think it's cool that we're paying attention to them, but those also feel like warm and fuzzy. But there is really strong research around the fact that humans are purpose driven. That is what brings us alive. It's what keeps us engaged. And so there are a lot of organizations that treat it as optional. Like it doesn't really matter if you're fulfilled as long as you are a body that's getting it done. But that's really scarce, right? Like no one wants to go to a job like that. Sometimes we do. And I have, but that's not really like the full potential of work. I believe that work shouldn't suck. Sometimes it does, but it shouldn't. And feeling a sense of contribution to your work, like looking at the research, contribution and purpose are some of the key drivers of productivity and business outcomes. Like that's just a fact. And so if we treat it as optional and we're only focused on like butts in seats, getting things checked off of a list, we're missing a huge opportunity for people to do their very best work because you can tell the difference if someone did something just to get it done versus they said, "Oh, this is my ish. I will kill this. I will put my heart into this." There's a huge huge difference there.
Yeah, I call it like the phoning it in. Like you can tell they're just like, here we go. Right. I phoned it in. I'm going through the motions, but I don't care. You have a different level. I mean, think about customer service. I don't care what kind of establishment you go to. You can tell the people who actually, you know, like their work, feel committed to the company, whether you go to a restaurant or a store, and the people who I joke, but I'm like, God, they hate their life. Like, how sad, right? And you can just tell they're just like, and it's like, God, how sad. I mean, like, yes, we all need to make a living, but, I don't care what the job is. There's an opportunity to feel connected and belong and included with the people you work with, to feel connected to a company purpose, to feel like you can make a difference with a customer. Like, you know what? You could be that bright spot. You could be that sparkle in someone's day who's having a really, really rough day. And every human interaction you have is an opportunity to make an impact. And I think when we look beyond ourselves and our own crap going on in our life and our own misery, whatever it might be, is we have an opportunity to show up differently, however that might be. And even if the job isn't the most exciting, maybe it's not about the work itself, it's about what does it contribute, like you said, to something bigger. And so, yeah, I love that. I love that. And so the design thinking, this process, so, people have all kinds of issues. So walk me through. I've got something that I'm trying to figure out. I've got something that, I'm trying to in my life or work or whatever it is. What are some questions that I should be considering, or I don't know, what's the process? I mean, I know you want to give everything away, but, like, what are some things that people could be thinking about that would help them leverage more sparkle, leverage this design thinking process to start to solve some challenges they're facing either in their personal life or, from a work standpoint, a team standpoint, an organization standpoint?
There are 4 questions that represent the full Sparkleworks framework. In this order, the order is important. The first is, what could be the problem? Get everything on the table, everything that you're dealing with that is problematic. What could be the problem? Once you have all of that, you organize that into themes. And the question then becomes, what's the root problem? Once you start organizing everything that's on your mind that's problematic, you're likely to see that these things are connected. And some things are just symptoms. There are other things that are truly at the core causing the problems. And a really important distinction to make here is that emotions are not problems. You cannot solve an emotion. If I feel shame, the problem isn't that I feel ashamed. The problem is that this person said this thing, which awakened this in me, which showed me that this issue from the past is not resolved. And I feel vulnerable in that lack of resolution, and I feel shame about it. So they're all connected, but the emotion isn't the problem. What could be the problem? What is the root problem? Once you've zeroed in on a problem that is truly causing those ripple effects, that is actionable, then the question becomes, what could I do about that? Going from like the most mundane, obvious solution to the most out of this world, I have no idea how I would make it happen, but that would be dope. Getting everything on the table. So, what could I do to solve this problem? And then once you have all of those, the question becomes, what will I do? And that's when you use the action priority matrix. You look and say, okay, which of these things have high impact? How does that relate to their effort? And when I look at all of these things together, what will actually solve my problem without overworking? What is the bang for my buck? And then that final question is, what do I feel sparkly about? If I look at that quadrant that is high impact, low effort, and I write that out in a statement, this is my problem, which causes these effects. So I'm going to do this about it. If you look at that final problem statement and you're like, oh, that sucks. Like the problem still feels like a problem and I don't feel excited about the solution. That sparkle is the tiebreaker, the indicator of where your energy is flowing. So the final question is, what's a sparkly version of this solution? And then at the very end, you're looking at this statement. The question is, did we sparkle it? Did we actually solve the problem in a way that we actually want to take action? And if the answer is no, circle back to either the solution or maybe the problem. If the solution you came up with won't solve the problem, it's possible that you're dealing in the wrong problem. And it is way easier to circle back to that problem phase within a hour and a half, 3-hour session. It's way easier to circle back to that than after weeks or months of work chasing the wrong solution.
Oh my gosh. I love that because there's so much synergy with what we do. And one of the things that you said, you're circling back to the problem, going back to action bias. There's a saying I learned long ago in one of my early coach trainings that, sticks with me is that if we have to ask ourselves or ask somebody else, what are you going to do? Or what's next? Or what's your next step? Consider we're asking it too soon. Because if we've spent enough time getting really, really clear about not just what the problem is, but if we've also, this kind of speaks to the sparkle, if we've gotten really clear of what are we wanting inside of that? Like, what are we wanting? And usually it's not a verb, it's a noun. Like, I'm wanting peace, or I'm wanting harmony, or I'm wanting clarity, or I'm wanting, there's some kind of like way of being that we're wanting inside of problems, whether it's team dynamics or organizational or even sales goals, whatever it is. And when we get clear about, yes, here's an issue, but here's what I'm wanting, when we explore it enough, when we get super, super clear, like that energy, it's almost like the next step becomes clear. It might be scary as hell, right? So I love it. It's like, it's not just what action do I need to take, but what will I? But it's like, oh, okay, if I'm sick of feeling this way in my body, and this is truly, I want something different, I have got to get really, really clear that what I really want is something different. And this is what it looks like. And I can visualize it and make it tangible so that that next step becomes like so logical. Like it's like wild horses couldn't drive me away, but we don't spend that time. We don't bring in the the energy. We just are like, here it is. And we try to force it. And then we wonder why people lose their steam partway through. Again, whether it's a New Year's resolution, whether it's a goal, whether it's a team project. So I love that you keep coming back to that. And the other thing that, as you were talking about those 4 questions that came up for me, is so often, if we really, really look at the problem, it's so easy to sit and deflect and blame circumstances, other people around us, the organization, my crappy coworker, my crappy boss, whatever, my bad neighbor, my fill in the blank, versus looking at ourselves. And a lot of times, it's not the only thing, but a huge part of the equation that we don't want to look at is, what am I contributing to this? Because either I'm not speaking up, right? I'm dimming my own sparkle, that I am showing up in a way that isn't helpful and isn't productive, but I don't like to admit that. Like, I've been showing up with overcompensation behaviors, or, fill in the blank. It's my own insecurities. Like, it's really cringy to look at ourselves and go, look in the mirror and go, what am I contributing to this current state? It's so much easier to sit back and cast blame to everybody else than to go, ugh, I have a part in this. And that means that I might have some really uncomfortable, like cringy work that I have to do. And I don't want to go there. So go back to, what will I do? And maybe you decide, no, I'm not going to. And that's whatever. I mean, the problem's going to persist. But I love that because it forces us to look at all angles. And I think part of your process is, it forces us to look at our part of, like, again, our circumstances. When people want to blame them, well, you're putting up with it. Like, you're continuing to enable or be comfortable standing in sewage or whatever. Like, you are, to some extent, you're enabling it by not setting a boundary, by not speaking up, by persisting it, by whatever. And it doesn't mean that you can flip a switch and make a change tomorrow, but you can start to put things in motion that, maybe that change is going to be 8 months down the road or a year down the road, but we can start putting things in motion again if we get clear and we own our own part.
Yes. And another part of the power of the process is that it forces you to define a problem that you can actually affect. And if you are defining your problem, if you're thinking about your problem in blame, you're going to end up with a problem that you can't solve because it has to do with someone else. And you can't control other people's behavior, as much to my chagrin.
Right, don't we wanna be like, "Come on, can't I just control them? Isn't there a remote control button?" Yeah,
Yeah. If
right,
this
yeah.
person just did this, then I could this. But that is not a plan because you can't control someone else. So if you're sitting in blame, you can't find a problem that you can actually solve. So I've heard from participants that that's part of the great power of the workshop is shifting perspective. When you look at all of your problems together, you stop seeing this like myopic, obsessive, oh, this thing is driving me crazy. And you can start to see patterns like, oh, wow. Okay. I did not realize that this is connected to this. But now that I see that connection, I can't unsee it. And it's uncomfortable to sit in the problem space. I think that's why so many people short circuit, like you said, especially for solvers. Like I will sit in the problem for ages, like trying to unpack it, trying to like get to the very bottom of it because I want to so thoroughly understand. But there are other people who are like, I'm done with this. Like, can we just please get into like planning and strategizing? Like, what are we going to do about it? And so I think sitting in the problem space is really uncomfortable for a lot of people, but knowing that eventually we're going to get there, like, I promise you, it's on the board. We're going to do that. I think that you can get the benefit of perspective on the challenges that you're facing without just like sitting in a stew of like self pity or overwhelm.
Yeah, well, I love that, and what that brought up for me is I was thinking about back I used to teach spinning classes, and it was like coaching on a bike or whatever, and but I remember, there was something that I would say, like, when we had a really hard part of the class, whether it was, like, we're going on a really tough hill or a tough section or whatever it is, and there was something I would say, it was like, you know, "Just pay attention that how you're showing up in the face of this challenge, whatever it is before you right here, is no accident, and it doesn't just show up in this moment, in this ride or whatever it shows up elsewhere in your life." And people will always go, "Oh my God, there's this hill climb, and my instructor doesn't know. I'm just gonna back off the resistance and coast through or whatever." I'm like, I bet you do that elsewhere in your life. So this is a training ground for how are you gonna take this outside of your so one of the things I always said is, whatever I did in that class was a mental and physical, but training for how do you handle things outside of that class. And my favorite would people would come and say, "Oh my gosh, I took you with me on that job interview." And I'm like, "Did we get it?" Or I took you with me and we hiked Machu Picchu. I'm like, "Was I tired?" I'm like, "Well, great." But I share that because I do think like if you talk about patterns, if you start paying attention, how you approach whatever it might be, how you approach this situation at work, how you approach this situation in a relationship, how you approach goal setting, how you approach a new season in life, how you approach whatever it is that life is throwing at you, because it always will throw something at you, how you approach that adversity, that challenge, that whatever is not an accident. It's not unique to that situation. It's not unique to that boss or that team member or that organization. It persists until we learn how to freaking deal with it. And so it's again, it's that we got to look in the mirror and go, "Oh, because I shy away. Oh, I don't speak up until I'm at my breaking point and then I blow up. Oh, I don't know how to set healthy limits. Oh, I'm a control freak." Like, and I know you and I talk, we're finishing up research that will be launching after this comes out of looking at some of that programming, but it's like it shows up in so many different places. And until we recognize that we've got this subconscious programming that is fundamentally flawed and has helped us to a point, it's not that it's all bad, but it is getting in our way. We can't see that this situation is not unique. And I bet if people just start paying attention, whether it's current or if you go to past, "Oh, I've experienced this before. Oh, this looks different, different players, but huh." And the common denominator in every single one of those scenarios, newsflash, is us, right? But it's like, "Ah, crap."
Yeah, ew, I don't want that to be true, but there it is. And the thing about those patterns is that at one point they did really well to serve the function. Like I am hyper vigilant of other people's emotions. And as a kid with volatile adults, it was critical to my safety that I was aware of how they were feeling so that I could protect myself. So that served a function, but now, as an adult dealing with other adults, it's not my job to manage their emotions. That's their job. And so, yes, that served a function at one point, but now it's a hindrance. And so, yeah, I work at the UCSD challenge course, and the leader there, Denise Olette, she says, how we do anything is how we do everything. So when I am facilitating on a high ropes course, 40 feet in the air, and I watch a corporate team and their dynamics, my first question to them is always, what role did you play in this exercise? And is that typical of the way that you tend to show up? And they look around the group and they're like, huh, yeah, I guess I do that a lot. Or actually, this was kind of a different experience, and here's why. So, how we do anything is how we do everything. It is an example of the things that are so ingrained in us that we don't even think about them. And especially under pressure, those things come to light faster than in any other circumstance.
100%, 100%. Well, and this is such a good segue into the questions that I like to ask all of my guests, because going back to you said, hey, like being hyper vigilant of emotions served me well, right? At some point, and it has a hindrance. And what I've learned is no matter how much work we've done on ourselves, is that we do all have these self-limiting stories that still rear their head from time to time. Mine does. I've gotten better at, here we go. But when we're in that space, we think it's just us. We think no one else suffers. Oh, this person seems like they have it all together. Oh, they've done so much work on themselves. They're enlightened. They're beyond it. Like, newsflash, if you're a human being, you're not beyond it. So, with that being said, Charlie, I would love it if you would share what is a self limiting story that you still tell yourself sometimes. And when it shows up, how do you move beyond it so that you can still sparkle and show up as a leader in your life?
I think for me, the biggest one that I'm coming up against right now is that I have to earn love. And I didn't learn that from my parents. It wasn't conditional. They loved me unconditionally. But there is something in me that says, in order to be loved, in order to be cared for, I need to give something of myself. I need to love in order to receive it. And so when people give me love that I feel is unearned, I either undervalue that, or I question their motives, or I simply reject it. So that is the phenomenon. But I think then what I come back to is all of the instances that I have shared love that was unearned on someone else's part. Like, I love this person simply for being who they are. I offered them this gift because of who I am and not because of what they did or didn't do to earn it. And so I look at that evidence and I say, okay, if I did that without that person earning love, I am worthy of what I share with others as well.
I love that, right? Yeah, because when we go, "Wait, it's okay for other people, not for me." Well, why? So I love that you're looking at the evidence, research-based. That's awesome. That's fabulous. All right, my sparkle friend, are you ready for quick questions?
I am.
Okay. Fill in the blank. Living authentically is
Natural.
bam. When the world is presenting an opening, but you don't feel like showing up as a leader, what do you do?
Be how you are.
Love it. What is something people would be surprised to know about you?
Sometimes I'm shy with my singing. Sometimes I feel like I am bothering people with my song, even though it is what comes most naturally to me.
All right, we're gonna get to the song in a second, but what is your favorite go-to movie?
Spirited. It's my favorite Christmas movie.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right, so speaking of songs, what is your go-to song?
Defying Gravity.
Did you see Wicked?
I've been waiting for that movie since I was a child, and it did not disappoint me.
So good. I was like singing, although I was mad that we have to wait for part 2. But other than that, no. Okay. What is something you can't live without?
My family.
Love it. What is something in your ordinary daily life that makes your heart happy?
Cold brew coffee. When I thought ahead the night before to make myself cold brew for the next morning. I call it
Ooh.
self-care cold brew.
Oh my God, I love that. Hey, some people have self-care, they meditate, some people are self-care cold brew. I like it. It's awesome. And what are you grateful for right now?
I am grateful for the slight New England chill outside because I live in San Diego and it is perfectly temperate, but I grew up here. I grew up with this frigid cold, and right now it's mild enough that it is still enjoyable.
I'm jealous. We're not. It's very frigid cold in Minneapolis right now. So here we go. All right. Closing question, Charlie. If you could challenge leaders everywhere to practice this one behavior that would create more human workplaces and equip everyone to show up as a leader, what would that be?
Listen with curiosity. Ask the questions that you genuinely want to know and be willing to take action based on the answers and honor the truth that people have practiced the vulnerability and risk to offer you.
Love that advice. I think we could all benefit from listening more with curiosity as well. So this has been so fun. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the tangible of how do we actually bring sparkle to life so it's not just a frivolous thing. I love that, we're practically on opposite coasts, not quite, and we are just bringing sparkle to the world. So thank you. Thank you, my friend. I've much appreciated this conversation.
Me too. I have deep gratitude for you. Thank you, Rosie.
I'm Rosie Ward, and this is Show Up as a Leader. To learn more, head over to peopleforwardnetwork.com and, of course, hit that follow button.